Hello, this is Brian Lysing with Financial Brokerage, and today's webinar is the IUL Sales Paradigm Shift, a better IUL design that positions you as an advisor. For those of you who may not be familiar with Financial Brokerage, we are a national marketing organization working with financial advisors and insurance agents all across the country in the areas of life insurance, annuities, long-term care insurance, critical illness insurance, Medicare supplements. That's going strong right now as we're hosting this in the middle of November. And we've been at this for well over 20 years now. I've been here just over 20 years myself, specializing in the life insurance area. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and taking time out of your day for this sales idea this morning. So today, just to give you a heads up on maybe something a little bit more specific on what we will focus on, we're going to be discussing Index Universal Life, but in particular, the type of product and the type of sale that revolves around the accumulation and ultimately the distribution of tax-free money with no market risk, along with some of the lowest fees of any retirement plans on the market for your clients today. When we get into this, we're going to start by looking at the typical IUL sale. And I'm going to use my definition of the typical IUL sale as looking at the industry averages. And we'll be able to see what that is. And then based on my experience speaking with all of you out there for a couple decades, I'm going to make an assumption that those averages were arrived at through a particular sales process, just because that's what most people do, right? We'll get into what might be wrong with that typical sales process, and of course, how you can do a little bit better. In fact, I'll walk you through a system that instead of this typical sale, you will instead learn how to increase the distributions to your client, increase the death benefit to their family, increase the compensation to you, all while staying within your client's budget. So, sounds pretty exciting. Let's get into that. So, how do you sell IUL right now? Some people actually begin with the face amount in mind. These are folks usually without much of any experience with IUL at all, and that usually doesn't work well. This is a different type of sale. It's not a protection-based sale where maybe you've determined your client needs $2 million of coverage, and you're running different quotes at that face amount. When we're looking at accumulation and distribution, it's not really what we want to do. Maybe you begin with the premium in mind. In fact, a lot of people do this. This is the typical IUL sale out there. We ask the client what they are comfortable paying per month or per year into a policy, or what they're setting aside into their retirement plan, and we run the illustration based on that amount. And that's going to be the basis of what I'm going to call the typical IUL sale. Now, some of you might actually begin with the distribution amount. How much does your client need to live on during their retirement years? And that's really where we want to get to in this market. So here's more details on what I'm calling the typical IUL sale. These stats were from 2017 from the organization Wink. They do a lot of research on index life, but a lot more on index annuities. And even though these numbers are from a few years ago, they don't change much over time. I would imagine for 2020, we're going to be within a year, one way or another with all of these. So your average prospect is 42 years old, making over $100,000 in their household. 80%, over 80% of the IUL sales are for accumulation purposes. That's why we're not starting with that death benefit. And the average premium going into an IUL is just over $9,000. A few years ago, I was tracking that every quarter. There was a little bit of fluctuation, but the average premium was always $9,000 something. So for purposes of the illustrations, we're going to use $9,221 today. Now, in this typical IUL sale, people usually begin with the premium the client can afford. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we ask the client, what they're willing to put into a product. We then solve for the minimum death benefit required to support that premium without becoming a modified endowment contract. We do that to maintain the tax advantages that are unique to permanent life insurance. We'll then usually use an increasing death benefit option during the funding years, switch that to a level death benefit during the distribution years. We do that to minimize the cost of insurance charges on both sides, or some companies do allow us to use a return of premium death benefit option. So by following this process, the result, I'm making an assumption here, is the $9,200 annual premium. This is what most people do. Now, why is this system backwards? Well, if you think about it, if our goal is actually to give clients retirement income, why don't we start by asking them the question, how much income do you need in retirement? Right? Isn't that what financial planners do when planning for the retirement income for their clients? They take a look at their situation and try to figure out, okay, how much income do you need? And then second, how are we going to get you there? What most folks do with IUL sales is start with, here's how we're going to get you there, and what you get is what you get. We don't know if that's how much you're going to need or not, right? So it's completely backwards. So with this type of a process, not only are you going to increase your sales, but you're going to increase your chances of clients actually following through and doing what they need to do. So here are the steps that we need to take as advisors to do this. We have to ask our clients what their current income is, and then ask them how much of that they're going to need in their retirement years. And there's actually a form on the next slide that we'll go over that can help with that. But we want to also explore their potential sources of income. It shouldn't all be coming from the IUL. Maybe they have money from a pension. Maybe they have money from a defined contribution plan like a 401k or a 403b. We need to take their Social Security income into account. Maybe they have other funds or other resources they're going to pull from, maybe land or an inheritance or something along those lines, maybe a rental property. And then we need to calculate their income based on these existing sources. So one of our companies, I believe this form came from Mutual of Omaha. Actually, you can help your clients figure out what their expenses are by using something like this. You don't have to use this one. You might have your own form that you like to use, but have them list their monthly expenses, for everything that they might spend money on, and then that's our retirement income that we're going to be needing. And then, of course, we can account for other income sources. And if there's a shortfall, that's what they're going to need in retirement. Once we've done that, we want to look for some yes answers to these questions. So, one, is there an income gap? If there is, that could lead to an IUL sale. Or maybe there isn't an income gap. They've got that all taken care of, right? Well, there's still a sale there. Maybe our client isn't comfortable with their current level of market risk. They don't want everything in the market. Maybe they don't want anything directly in the market, and subjected to wide swings from time to time. The market's going great right now in late 2021, but maybe it won't be in 2022. We have no idea. Maybe our client isn't comfortable with their tax exposure. Maybe everything is in a 401k or an IRA, and it will all be taxable in retirement. We know what the tax rates are today. We don't know what they're going to be in 10 years or 20 years. They might be higher. If they are, it sure makes a lot of sense to pay the taxes today and not pay them in the future. So if your client answers yes to any of these three questions, then we need to continue down this path and look at IUL as a potential solution for them. So as I mentioned earlier, this new way of selling IUL or designing the product It all works from working backwards from the income needed. So I'm going to make the assumption now that we figured out how much money our client needs. And in the example that follows, I've used a nice round number, $100,000. For this purpose, our client needs $100K per year in retirement. Once we have that number, we're going to have to estimate the premium to put into a policy to generate that distribution amount. We're still going to solve for the minimum death benefit and maximum income, but we're going to have to use a lot of trial and error. This is not a quick quote that you can put together in just 2 minutes. It's going to take some time and several full illustrations to arrive at this. Now, we don't have that much time in our webinar, so I've done that already. And here's an example from an illustration. If you can see the numbers, it ends up being pretty small when you just copy and paste from an illustration. But our distribution amount in this case is just over $100,000. And you're going to see the input numbers later on. Actually, you can see it on this screen right here that this particular client was going to be putting in $1,200 a month into this IUL. So after all the trial and error, that's where we ended up. Now, to compare this to the typical sale, if you start with the premium in mind to get to that $9,200 annual premium, right? We did that by asking our client, how much can you afford per month? And the average client says $770. Well, if we continue down that path, we have a face amount of just over $250,000. That only gives our client maybe $65,000 for retirement. But we just did a little analysis with them, and they determined they needed $100,000. So they still had a $35,000 gap. Where's it going to come from? Well, by going through our planning process, all our client has to do is pay $1,200 a month into the IUL. We've increased the premium by 50%. We've increased the face amount by about 50%. And now they have exactly the amount that they told us they were going to need during their retirement. Now, this helps you as well because we've increased our target premium by 50%. So that's more money in your pocket and the right amount of money going to the client during their retirement years. So pretty simple. We asked a few questions and everybody is happy, right? Well, maybe. So this happens all the time with retirement planning or with any major purchase or expenditure for a client. What if this premium's beyond their budget? That's going to happen for a lot of your clients out there. Well, one thing that you could do would be to back off the premiums to an affordable amount. Now, maybe your client reverts back to that $770 a month that they said that they could afford, but I'm going to make an educated guess here and say that they're probably not going to back up that far. Once you show them that number that it's going to take to meet their retirement goals, they're not going to go all the way back to the number that they had in mind as a premium initially. They might go back a little bit, and maybe they go halfway, right? But if they don't go back all the way, and they don't want to go back all the way, we're going to still end up with a higher premium amount than if we had not gone through this whole process. So that's going to help our client, and it's also going to help you as well. Now, there's something else we can do. I'll show you that here next. So if the client does go back all the way to that original premium or go back partway, there's another step we can take here. We can actually give the client the premium they want and the income they need. And here's how you do it. And not every insurance company has this sort of a system built in to their illustration software. There's at least one I know of, maybe two. But we're going to begin with that client's premium, that $770 a month that they said they could afford. We're still going to end up with $100,000 of income. And we didn't do this with bonuses or anything special. But we're just going to schedule premium increases into our illustration. Once again, though, we're going to have to use trial and error to arrive at their retirement income level that they really need to have. Now, for the illustration that you're going to see here, by doing this trial and error, I arrived at a 5% increase for this particular client. And we would hope that a 5% increase per year is enough and in line, something that the client can afford. Maybe they're getting raises from their employer every year, or if they're running a business, hopefully their business is growing at a pace that they can afford to increase the premiums by 5% per year. But that's what it's going to take in this example if our 42-year-old wants to start with that $770 per month. And you can see in the premium column over on the left, we've got the 5% increases. At some point in time, we arrive at a premium that is higher than it would have been to start with. But that was our client's choice because they couldn't pay that initially. And if you look at the very bottom on that column on the left, you'll see we have $100,950 in this illustration. So we arrived at the same place as we had before. It's a little easier to see the numbers on this particular slide. So if we compare our planning sale, where our client's paying $1,200 a month, generated $100,000 of income, our commissionable target was over $6,000. If we instead start with a lower premium and increase it by 5% per year, we've got a little higher face amount. That's a 23% increase. We're still right in range at roughly the same income, $100,950. And again, this is what our client determined they needed. And now our target premium has increased. That's a 23% increase. So you just gave yourself a raise by doing a little extra work with the illustration, a little extra trial and error. Now, if we compare this increase in premium sale to the typical sale that we started with, the numbers are even more different from one another. So we're still starting with the same amount per month going into the contract, but we've almost doubled the face amount for the client. So if they should pass away before they hit their retirement years, their family's getting twice as much money. Now, instead of giving them 35% less income than what they really needed, we're giving them exactly what they needed for retirement. And our commissionable target premium is increased by 93%. We have almost doubled what goes into our pockets while giving the client exactly what they need by starting at a premium that is still within the budget that they told us they could afford to start with. And I forgot I had this slide here because this slide outlines exactly what I just said. But this is the whole system summed up right here. We solved the client's retirement income problem. They're comfortable with the premium, and we've almost doubled your paycheck while doing that. So what do you need to do next? Well, first of all, you got to find your target market. And going back to that study from Wink, we know most purchasers of index life are between 35 and 55 years old. The average age is 42. Household income's over $100,000. We know 80% of the sales are for accumulation purposes. If we want to drill down a little bit more, you might look specifically for clients who make too much money to put anything into a Roth IRA. You also might look for people who are maxing out their 401ks right now. They'd like to set aside more money for retirement, but they're not allowed to by the IRS. Maybe you know some business owners who aren't happy with the contribution limits on those plans or other plans that they have available to them. Or companies that are paying bonuses to key execs. Maybe they want to pay the bonus through a cash value life insurance policy. Now, if we want to drill down even more to some a little bit lower level here, or more precise levels is what I should say, you might look at young professionals. These folks would be in the 30 to 45 age range, making some pretty good money, and they are smart enough to know that they need to be saving for retirement and protection for their family. You also want to look at what I would call pre-retirees. These are people that have probably already been setting aside some money for retirement, but it might be just in one place, maybe in a 401k, They don't have any sort of tax diversification. Their money is totally exposed to the ups and downs of the stock market, and they don't have anything that's really protected. And luckily, these people still have some time to grow their money within any vehicle that they choose to put it into. And also, you don't want to completely discount folks that are on the older end of the spectrum. As long as they're at least 59 and a half years old, if they have money set aside somewhere else in some sort of qualified account, at that age, they no longer have to pay a 10% penalty to move those funds. And you could actually start moving some of that money into an IUL. They would have to pay the taxes each and every year that they do that, but it might make sense for them to pay today's taxes rather than the taxes in 10 years or 20 years. They're going to come out ahead, and we can probably move that money over the course of 5 years at the shortest and still make this work. So there's plenty of data out there as far as target markets for these type of sales. So how do you find these people? The first thing I would do is look at your own client database, whether it's primarily auto and homeowners clients, or you've got some investment clients, or people that are registered through the groups that you enroll, or whoever's in your client database. I would reach out to those people. I would reach out to them through social media, through posts on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, maybe even on TikTok. Get your kids or grandkids to help you with that. You want to make sure you're emailing to these people as well. And I also would not discount the old-fashioned snail mail. Put out a quarterly or monthly newsletter, or just send them a letter asking a few questions about their current retirement planning. You could also conduct webinars. I know people aren't really back to doing full live seminars yet. In some places people are, but webinars like this one are a great way to connect, especially with your own clients. They already know you, and all they have to do is hop on the computer for 20 minutes to learn about this. So that's the conclusion of the webinar on the IUL Sales Paradigm Shift. Feel free to reach out to us here at Financial Brokerage for some follow-up questions or for assistance with illustrations along these lines. We're happy to help. You can reach any of us here at 800-397-9999, or many of you already have our emails.